we're back with another Dominion Menagerie preview. Today we've got another event. It's called Stampede. Costs 5. And it says if you have 5 or fewer cards in play, gain 5 horses onto your deck. Please note that it says 5 or fewer cards in play and not 5 or fewer actions in play. So this includes treasures, which means it's actually going to be pretty hard to meet the conditions of this event, right? First of all, you can buy it even if you have more than 5 cards in play. So, be a little bit careful about that. But it's going to be kind of rare, kind of difficult to consistently, well, I'm going to say activate this, but basically get the effect once you buy it, right? If you have 6 or more cards in play, then having said that, 5 horses onto your deck is pretty good, and the horses themselves won't be in play because they return to the supply, not to the supply, to their pile, right? So it is very possible to do this. I mean, at first blush, what kind of a deck is going to have 5 or fewer cards in play most often? And at first blush, it's money decks, right? Because money decks don't draw a lot of cards, so they don't play a lot of cards in a turn. You can have 5 or fewer cards in play. Um, Please also note that you can choose to not play all of your treasures, right? So you can play only a few treasures and buy this if you want to. Um, you play 2 peddlers and then a silver and a copper, and that's 4 cards in play, and you can buy this, right? So great. It's just going to be a bit hard to, with 5 cards or fewer, have had enough of an impact to buy this and something else, right? So that leads me to think that money decks are going to be um, kind of the most happy to have this card. I don't know, it's quite the right term, but they're gonna like this card kind of more than most other decks because part of the problem with money decks is they get to a point where they have a bit of difficulty in closing out the game. And with this, when they start, you hit 8 and then you miss 8 and you hit 8 and you miss 8. The turns that they're missing 8, if they still hit 5, they can get a Stampede, and then they're going to have, a 10 card hand if they want it the next turn because they're going to play 5 horses. And playing 5 horses, getting you a 10 card hand, is going to mean that you're much, much more likely to hit 8. In fact, you're very likely to hit 8 if you're starting with 5 horses. So basically, I think that means that most any turn that they're missing, if they still hit 5, they can make it up to 8 and make province then. And also, probably a non-trivial percentage of the time, they're going to be able to hit 10 without having to play all of those horses, so they can keep a couple of those horses one or two of those horses unplayed and have them around for later to help their longevity even more. So I think this is a pretty good event for money decks, which is surprising. Um, Decks that are trying to draw and do more, it's very hard to have 5 or fewer cards in play, um, especially reliably over the long term. If you're just trying to go off of only this, um, then you can have, you can have drawn from horses, say from a previous stampede, and then you need some way of getting plus buy and enough money to get this and get another card that's useful. And that seems a bit difficult. I don't know. Um, at least to do reliably. I'm sure that it will come up at some points. But there are a couple of kinds of cards that I want to talk about that probably also help this. And it's like one shots and to some extent trashers, and those are sort of related to each other. but we already had a preview card earlier. If you go back into my earlier previews, it was on day 2 or 3. I can't remember at this point. That was Stockpile. It was a treasure card that exiled itself upon being played. Um, so you play it, you get an effect, but it's no longer in play, right? You have a similar thing with reserve cards that when you play them, they go onto the reserve mat. I don't know how many of those there actually are, but Ratcatcher kind of works that way, which I mean, there's pros and cons, Ratcatcher and Guide. When you play them, they go onto the mat. When you call them, they come back. So that's overall maybe not net so great, but there's, say, Wine Merchant, right? Wine Merchant, once you play it, you get the economic impact, but it goes on the mat. Um, Similarly, Distant Lands, right? If I play a Distant Lands, I've gotten this VP surge, but it's gone on the mat, so it's no longer in play. So there's some synergy there. Mining Village, although at that point you're kind of wrecking your own ability to do stuff. Mining Village works if you trash it. Spoils. Spoils are economy that don't stay in your deck and don't stay in play once you play them. So that can be a way to get a good chunk of money. Counterfeit. Counterfeit, I think, is a big one. You trash the other treasures you're playing. They're not in play um, anymore. Maybe Horn of Plenty if you kind of partially go off. Um, and you trash the Horns of Plenty because you're gaining victory cards. I don't know about that though, because for Horn of Plenty to work, kind of seems like more of a nombo. Because for Horn of Plenty to work, you have to have a lot of differently named cards in play, and to have differently named cards in play, you have to have cards in play. So I don't know about that one. I don't think that'll actually work out too well. But you can see the kind of card that I'm talking about. Counterfeit trashes other cards. Spoils return themselves to the supply. Madmen return themselves to the supply. Horses and experiments return themselves to the, well, not necessarily to the supply, right? But sometimes to somewhere else. Mercenary to some extent works for this. Ways of getting economic benefit that don't require you to have cards in play, stockpile, those kinds of things, I think will work really well for this. But for the most part, I actually do think that this is going to help money decks more than anything. And for money decks, I think this is actually pretty darn strong. It gives the fast money decks the reliability that so often they lack. So I would be watching out for this um, for money decks as a potential money enabler. Um, Having said that, I don't think it's going to be like, ooh, games with this card you really want to play money in. It's just you're more likely to. But I think in a lot of cases, if you can draw, you'd still rather draw substantially than do this. But also, those other kinds of decks, you might take a turn at some point to just add 5 horses to your deck. Now, they do go on top, so you're going to lose some of them right away. But if you have a dud, but you can still make 5 money, you can add Stampede at that point, and you're extremely unlikely to get a dud the next turn, right? So that's also something to watch out for. Or if you're just going for a big mega turn and it's a bit hard to draw, you can do this, once or twice, and then that might enable you to get the draw that otherwise wouldn't be present. So I think that's also going to be a big factor. Pretty interesting card, I think. Not a card, it's an event, so it's a card-shaped object. But it's technically not a card by the rules of the game, even though physically, it's a card. Who are we kidding? Anyway, that's it for today. We'll catch you tomorrow with another Dominion Menagerie bonus preview. Thanks for watching, everybody.